Peace, everybody. Good morning. This beautiful, chilly Wednesday morning. um, so I wanted to. This is a new TikTok channel that I have, or whatever TikTok account that I have, and so most of the followers that I'm getting are not familiar with me in my last channel. So I just want to bring y'all up to speed a little bit so you know. Actually, I had 2 accounts and both of them were hacked. But both of them primarily dealt with, activism and things of that nature. And the one was specifically for the organization that I started in order to continue my son's work. That organization, well, I started to. That organization is Beyond Clouds, and there's also Women of Medicine Health Initiative. Beyond Clouds, well, they both are, again, to continue my son's work and to expand his work, because he was murdered just over a month after turning 30 years old. My son is Murid Abdullah Muhammad Williams Nisha Kamakwak, and the English translation of his indigenous Munsee name is Two Clouds, so that's what he's known as, Two Clouds. I'm trying to decide if I want to give you the long story or the short. I'll give you the short. You can find out some of the other stuff on the YouTube channel, Beyond Clouds 6745. Hope y'all can hear me over that airplane that's trying to dim my shine. But so yeah, he was an indigenous rights activist, a water protector, land defender. He was extremely successful within the land back movement. He and we are Afro-Indigenous people. His father's people are Ramapo of the Munsee Lenape, and my people are Mohawk, Kanigahaga, and Taino. So, he was enrolled in his father's tribe, the Ramapo Lenape, that are headquartered in Mahwah, New Jersey. The Ramapo, and I suggest, or what's the word? I suggest that you just Google them. Ramapo, Ramapoughh. Google them before 2016, and then from late 2016 and onward, including now. So before my son came up there to the land, he wanted to, and we call it the land, but it's in the middle of a very prosperous town. So Two went up there in late 2016 because his great-grandfather actually moved the family from up there to Newark, New Jersey, which is about 30-40 minutes away. Moved them to Newark, New Jersey a few generations ago because there was just such, racism and stuff like that up there. And so he brought the family down to Newark, New Jersey. And initially, they, like a whole lot of indigenous people back in the day, were claiming other ethnicities because it was safer. And so his family was saying that they were Italian because they were light-skinned, and people back then were especially dumb when it came to light-skinned folk like me. Today too, but far more than today. And so, you can really say you're white or anything back then because people were just very ignorant as into, admixtures and stuff like that. And so they moved down there, and then eventually it was safe to just live as black people. They are mixed race Afro-Indigenous people. The Ramapo Lenape are a mixture of Lenape, Indian, African or African Americans, and white Dutch primarily. And so they look all kind of ways. You know, they could really pass for a lot of different things, because again, people are just uninformed when it comes to mixtures. They still think that you can look at someone and tell what they are, and you just simply cannot. So, you know, his great-granddad, I guess I'm going for the long story, his great-granddad moved the family from up there a few generations ago. I always taught my children, since I was able to homeschool and all that jazz, I always taught my children who they were. And so I knew that his grandmother, Chu's grandma, had a written lineage that the great-grandfather had written. And so I used to always tell him, like, get your dad to give that to you. And they were just like slow dragging. His dad wouldn't ask his mom for it and all kind of things. And then, you know, the grandmother was telling him, like, don't go up there to those people, because they will kill you. And but you know, he was intent on it. I was intent on him learning about his people, or, you know, not just the Ramapo, that's all our people. We embrace all our heritage. And so late 2016, because he was a polyglot, he spoke many different languages fluently. And so he went online and found out that they were having a monthly class up there. And so he went up there for the class. Now, before that time, during that time, and for generations and generations and generations before, they were known by a very derogatory term called Jackson Whites. So when he asked his dad, who are our people exactly? Like, we know they Lenape or Delaware Indians, but like, what can you tell us? He said, no, yeah, we're Jackson Whites. He didn't know that that was a derogatory term, because the family had become, you know, detached from the community, and for whatever reason, he just didn't know. So Tu went up there and everything, and within like a week or two, the tribal chief, you know, of talking with the tribal chief and stuff like that, the tribal chief brought him down to the one plot of land that the Ramapo still owned. And that is a 13.9 piece of land. Not really much can be done to it because it floods. And it is smack dab in the middle of a very wealthy mansion community, which is known as the Mawa Hunt and Polo Club. And so the Ramapo use it as their religious land, and it's sacred to them. But the tribal chief was about to lose it. He was holding on to it by the skin of his teeth. And so, and you know, it's like, it's the backwater of the larger Ramapo River. It's the backwater there. So backwater, if you know anything about waterways, it's shallow, it's still water, it's just very pretty, but it's just there, it's not very deep or anything. And so the tribal chief brought my son there, brought Two Clouds there, and told him, like, all these white people trying to take our land and all that. You know, he knew that too. I raised him in like black radical revolutionary tradition, and so he like knew how to present this to him for sympathy, for empathy, and hopefully some sort of camaraderie. And lucky for him, my son was like, nah, I'll help you. Because, you know, the chief was telling him, like, nobody would help him. None of the men in the tribe would help him. None of the officials, town officials, and anyone would help him. Like, nobody would help him. So Two Clouds was like, I'll help you. You know what I mean? Like, this is the shit we've been waiting for my whole life. You know what I mean? And so he called me and he said, you know, Umi, we back home in North, we fighting and killing each other over blocks that don't even belong to us. So there's no way I'm gonna let these white folk take our ancestral land. And you know, I was like, bet, like, what you want me to do? Like, how we doing this? And so that was the start. This is the same time that the DAPL pipeline protest and everything was going on, and just revolution, indigenous revolution, you know, was in the air. Like, you know, people would, you know, nowadays we have Facebook and stuff like that. Well, back then it was Facebook and stuff and Twitter and everything. And it was just live. It was like everybody was riled up, ready to do this. And so Two Clouds, he was at the helm. So I guess, I'm not sure of the timeline, if he came up there while the chief and his partner, Owl or whomever, I don't know who else was with them, but went up there to South Dakota, to stand with Standing Rock. And so when they came back down, I'm not sure if that was while Two was doing the classes, they came back, or if it was right after. I don't remember. But nonetheless, they said, hey, we should like do the same thing, because they had Two there saying, all right, what we about to do? And so they decided to start on the religious land. They decided to name it the Split Rock Sweetwater Prayer Camp, and Two Clouds was the camp leader. And from there, I will let you do your own research. You can Google Two Clouds Ramapo, and all this stuff is going to come up. I'm going to say this to you, as in any group, the chief or the president or whomever is the figurehead, but everything that was being done was from Two Clouds, and Chief Perry was just the figurehead. But in a lot of the videos and articles and stuff like that, you will see Two Clouds is being interviewed and whatnot, and his words are being used. And even if Chief Perry would come along, because Two had become the spokesperson also for the Ramapo. And sometimes if, or a lot of the times when the chief would be called to come and like speak at a place, he would bring Two Clouds, because Two was a scholar, you know, he was a historian, and he was very articulate in his speech, and, you know, just charming. He could, and this is all like 24, he could speak and relate to people no matter what their status, their, you know, position, or anything like that. And so he would bring Two, and Two would, you know, just look at some of the lectures with the two of them. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyway, so all that happened. What you will find if you do your research is that Two Clouds, because of Two Clouds, like literally because of Two Clouds, he wrote up a document and everything, and saved that piece of land for them, which is why they now own it. And he also was instrumental in a movement that was already taking place in stopping a pipeline that was set to be laid from, it was going to be laid from Albany, New York to Linden, New Jersey, and it was going to go through Mahwah, and as well as through one of the Ramapo burial sites where they have like 1,000 ancestors buried. And so Two was very instrumental in that. He traveled all over the place talking, like speaking. He spoke at the UN, at one of the environmental conferences. He spoke at a lot of educational institutions like NYU and different places. He actually was a consultant for Ramapo College, which is on the Ramapo Indian land. Ramapo College not being affiliated with the tribe. They are, all of the Ramapo stuff that's unaffiliated with the tribe is spelled Ramapo. And so he did all that, and then, you know, he began fighting in court, finding the treaties and deeds and stuff like that, and fighting in court, winning back dozens and dozens of acres of land that had been stolen from the Ramapo. He reclaimed that. He also inspired a couple of landowners who had bought the land fair and square. You know, they had empathy for the situation because of Two Clouds, and they, you know, donated some of their land. They tried to give land to Two Clouds for himself, but he would never take it because he said the land doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the people. He lived on the first parcel of land there for nearly 2 years through 2 winters in order to stop the Polo Club, the Polo HOA from, there was just a lot of stuff going on back then. The Polo Club and the town were working in cahoots to, now that he has cemented the land for them, but now they were trying to dictate how they could use the land. They didn't want them gathering there for religious ceremonies or for anything. It was just a lot of craziness, and two in protest stayed there, and they fought in court over and over and over again. You can find all of this stuff online. And, you know, they were hitting them with daily fines of $12,500 and all that kind of stuff. So because of Two, again, being at the helm, even though the chief is the one who was getting, you know, some of the kudos, it was all my son. And so he just did so many things for the Ramapo, including they were no longer being seen as Jackson Whites and as mountain savages and like inbreds and stuff like that. They now started getting, because of my son, and now have a seat at the table and respect and allyship of thousands, you know, allyships of indigenous organizations and people who have high status because of my son. And again, if it was not because of Two Clouds, how come it never happened before that? It never happened until he came up there. So he just did a whole lot of things for the people, but unfortunately, there was a lot of jealousy and envy, and some of them murdered him. Two Clouds served the Ramapo as in many positions, and including secretary, tribal secretary, council person, just in a lot of aspects, official spokesperson. And about a month before he was murdered, he was elected war chief. And so there's this dude who, although he has a white mother and was raised by white folks, he feels that he has the authority to come after Afro-Indigenous people, Lenape, here on the East Coast primarily, I guess, and claim that they are pretendians and all that sort of thing. And although he was pretending to be the hereditary chief of the Oklahoma Delaware, he came up there on the land. He sneaked up there on the land and started, you know, making dangerous threats towards the tribe. So that was mid-June. And so a couple of weeks later, about 3 weeks later, another Afro-Indigenous person who is rallied as being some sort of great indigenous activist, actually, so far as we have been able to find, set my son up told him that she had put together a meeting up in Mashpee for my son to garner support against this jerk who came up there causing trouble. And so the weekend of July 4th, my son went up there. He drove. It's on a regular day, it's 4 hours between Mahwah and Mashpee. And so this was the 4th of July weekend. He went up there believing that there was going to be a meeting, but there was not. And so when he drove back down on the 2nd, July 2nd, and about 18 hours later, he went missing. And he was found on July 6th. He went missing on July 3rd. He was found July 6th. Dead, decomposed, missing an eye, missing his ears, missing the lower half of his face. And he had been dumped in that same water, on that same religious land that he actually saved for them. And then they tried to stage the scene by overturning his canoe. I'm going to re-upload a bunch of the videos I had on my other channel so people can see. But suffice to say, I knew from the beginning that he had been murdered when I first got, when I first made the call. Because none of them called me to let me know my son had been found dead hours before. And so, my son and I had spoken twice the day before. So he told me some information where I knew immediately he had been murdered. And so what we have come to find in the nearly 3 years since then is that not only was I right, because he had no signs or symptoms of having drowned. I have a video where I called the canoe manufacturer, and they confirmed that that 16-foot canoe was specifically made for whitewater rafting and would not have flipped over, even if somebody flips out of it. I had already known this because I spoke with an actual canoeist, an expert canoeist, and he assured me that canoes don't flip over if you fall out of them. But I needed to bring proof to the people, right? We've also found out, so we know that they indeed did stage the scene and that he was murdered elsewhere and dumped there. We also know that in the police operations report, the Mahwah Police Department states that they got a call from 2 passersby who accidentally stumbled upon my son and called 911 for help. We know that that's not true. The operations report was time-stamped at 10:30 something that morning. The 911 transcript showed that the first call did not come in until nearly an hour and a half later. Excuse me, I'm a little shaky because it's cold out here. So the first call did not come until nearly an hour and a half later, 80 minutes later, and it was not from a civilian, it was from a police officer. And we know from both of those documents that they decided before they even left the scene from being with my son alone for nearly an hour and a half doing Lord knows what, that they had decided before even leaving him that there was not going to be a police investigation. And that included not assessing the cameras. There are 4 cameras. There's one way in, one way out. The same entrance is the entrance is this exit. And there are 4, and it's a narrow bridge, about maybe 15, 18 feet long bridge or something like that. And it's narrow, only 1 car at a time. And there are 4 cameras there, 2 showing everyone who comes in to ensure everyone who goes out, they didn't even look at those. We also know that the chief, the next day sent an official letter to the medical examiner and not the police department, giving up, first of all, lying, saying that I was on board with it, as if he had spoken to me, and that he wanted to have a full forensics investigation done on my son's body, and he wanted the information sent to him, the results sent to him, and that I was on board. That was a lie. We hadn't talked at all. And also, I would never have given him that authority. You'll find out as you peruse my social medias, or if any of you get to know me or already know me, I ain't that type of chick. I don't give nobody authority over any of my children, nor myself. And I for sure as hell wouldn't have given it to him, because my son already told me about him. And for a long time, they had big beef for a very, very long time. There's no way in hell. Also, we are Muslim. We don't, in Islam, we do not do autopsies and things unless we believe that there is foul play involved in a person's death, which is why I did on my own, before I even knew about this letter, which is why I did allow for them to do the autopsies, because I knew immediately they had been killed or murdered. They tried to kill him. Never gonna happen. So yeah, that's what the chief had done, and in that letter he gave 5 different reasons why my son could have been dead. One of those reasons was about the guy, that this guy had come up there and had been issuing threats. And in this letter, the tribal chief stated that he had already filed a civil complaint and I think a criminal complaint against this guy that was already on file. So, but he never sent this letter to the police department. He also stated that he believed that my son had a heart attack the year before, which was not true. He also stated that he didn't think my son could swim well, which was not true. My son was an avid canoeist, and that particular water where he was found, again, it was always low to begin with, but during that season it's always really low. So yeah, he said those things. Oddly enough, he didn't mention anything about that he might have been drunk, because that was the rumor that he was spreading for months and months and months and months and months, that my son had been drunk and essentially killed himself because he got in the boat drunk. So all these things were untrue, and but nonetheless, the county medical examiner wrote on the official autopsy report. First of all, he did not include the missing parts of my son's face. There's nowhere on the autopsy to be found. The only reason I know is because I sent for the photos, which the county medical examiner's office, the supervisor there, calls me herself trying to talk me out of actually getting, but I was like, give me them photos. And so they created that I got the photos, and that I was very well acquainted with Miss Mamie Till Mobley. I knew what I needed to do. So yeah, the county medical examiner didn't include that crucial information on the autopsy report. But on top of that, despite the his forensic scientific examination and laboratory assessments, he put on there that my son had died from drowning, although the lab report distinctly shows that there was no evidence of a drowning. And he also put that there was, even though the cardiology portion of the report distinctly shows that my son had not died of a heart attack and that he had never had any heart attacks, because like there's no scar tissue and the different things that come with having a heart attack. There was no evidence of any of that. Despite that, he put that in the gross findings. And so, me being a nurse, I was able to read those things. And, you know, I contacted the medical examiner, who incidentally called me himself before I, you know, ordered any of those documents. Called me himself telling me that my son had not that he had not died of an accident, that he had not died of suicide, and that he had not died of any sort of medical emergency. And he told me specifically, because I told him that people are spreading rumors that he had a heart attack and died, so I wanted to hear from his mouth. And he cut me off even. He said, listen, don't listen to people. People don't know. I know. Nothing was wrong with your son's heart. Yet when I get the autopsy, he has something different documented. And so when I spoke with him again and I say, hey, why'd you do that? I already know why he did it. I know where he got the information, but you didn't know I know. And so I asked him about it, and he said, well, we didn't find anything, but somebody told me, but I don't know who. So, me being who I am, I went over his head. And I went to the New Jersey State Chief Medical Examiner and gave him a thick packet of all evidence, proof, tangible, text messages, photographs, official documentation, all sorts of things. And of course, I sent him, which he could get on his own, but I sent him the autopsy. I sent him emails and correspondence between me and different departments. And he went and reassessed the science on his own, along with all of the evidence that I sent him. And he says, nope, there's no evidence that he died from a drowning. And remember, with drowning, you don't only get liquid in your lungs, which he didn't have any of that. Other things happen. Because there's liquid in your lungs. Remember, drowning means asphyxiation from, inhaling water. There's none of that. How do you asphyxiate? It has to go through your nasal passageway and or your mouth. Nothing. No liquid. No debris. There's a froth that foams up due to gases and such, from like a chemical, like a chemical transformation that happens. That wasn't there. The position of his body, drowners have a certain position to their body. My son didn't have that. There's a great many things. Also, if you go to my blog, beyond-clouds.org/blog, there's a photograph of what my son's face looked like when he was found. None of this is conducive to a drowning, or, they said, wow, he was, I asked the medical examiner about that too. He said, oh, his eye, it was just sunken in, and, it may have just decomposed. It's probably decomposed. Like he wasn't giving me any definitive answers or anything. But that makes no sense because, one, when you see the socket, nothing is sunken in there at all. And also, why would one eye decompose and not the other? There's just a lot of things that was like, So Um, what I've been doing is fighting for justice for Two Clouds. It is a fact that he was murdered. It is a fact that he was murdered over greediness, over land and money. It is a fact that he was murdered out of jealousy because, as far as they were concerned, even though there are a lot of dark-skinned Ramapo, they considered my son a fake, that he was a black guy pretending to be Indian, even though he is enrolled in the tribe. But because he didn't grow up there in the mountains, they would say stuff like that to him. They would call him a Hollywood Indian because they were jealous that he was getting, so much recognition from these white folks that they've been struggling their whole lives to get respect from and have never been able to get, So they were just, they had issues with him. He was the only one standing in the way of misappropriation of land up there. It's just a lot of things that were happening. And unfortunately, the people in his extremely tight circle decided that they would plot against him with others from a few other nations and murder him. And they believed for some reason that I would just sit back and not do anything about it. They thought that they could sneak up on him, murder him. Let me tell you, there's no way that these guys who I know did it. There's no way that they could have done it alone. And that they could have just walked up on him. My son was an extremely skilled fighter in different styles. So he studied karate, he studied bendo, he studied capoeira, he studied kickboxing. He was a boxer. He you couldn't just run up on him. And he's from Newark, he's from the streets. Unlike these cats up there. And all of his friends who know him, who grew up with him and stuff, and have seen him fight and things, they're like, so yeah, there's a lot going on with this. But that's why I'm here on this social media, to help bring awareness, not only to what happened to my son, but what is happening to indigenous people everywhere, what is happening to our protectors everywhere. Our youth, who we convinced to stand and fight for the people, are being murdered, and no one's doing anything about it. Not for real doing anything about it. And if indigenous people, indigenous groups are not federally recognized, they get even less done. My son, although we are Afro-Indigenous and we identify as black racially, and ethnically we identify as Afro-Indigenous, because Two Clouds was enrolled in the Indian tribe, a state-recognized Indian tribe, the government does not recognize him as Indian. And they also don't actually identify him as non-Indian. And so there's no space within the rules and the laws for people like him. They just don't exist. And so I've been doing a whole hell of a lot of things behind the scenes, which will create a willing, which will help indigenous people on a whole. can't just go around killing people because you don't like what they're doing. Especially all these people who claim to be advocates and allies for indigenous rights activists and indigenous people overall. What I've learned is that so many of them are full of shit, whether they're indigenous or not. They're just not. It's quite easy, and we know this from different realities, that people most often talk about who they are and what they are, which is easy to do when you don't have to prove it. But it's when you have to prove it and then you don't, even though you have platforms and thousands of people who you can call on to help push a movement forward, and you don't, that's because you're ill-intended. So we're going to eventually do something about those kind of people too. But for now, my son will be used as leverage to help bring the movement forward, to help gain basic human rights for all indigenous people, but for sure indigenous people who are not recognized by the federal government. My son was just minding his business, living off the land, about to go back to school. He would have been teaching, building, doing his thing, but in a very closed environment. And they didn't like that. They didn't like that. They thought that they could kill him, and that they could, and they thought that they could kill his mission and the things that he could do for the people and would do for the people. They thought that they could kill all of that by murdering him, dumping him, plotting with the police and the county government. But all they did was bring him to the people, bring him globally.
You know, anyone can scare me, but no one can intimidate me. You know, and the fact of the matter is, if something were to happen to me, you know, and my life was taken, or if not just me, anyone, right? That's okay. They killed our ancestors in the past, and we're still here.